In this video, I'm going to go over my Dragon Hunter build. This is the first build in this series where I'll be making a build for every single DLC weapon, so let's get to it. Now the reason this build is called the Dragon Hunter is because it's built around the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana, which is a new weapon type that was included in the DLC. It basically takes the best of the Greatsword and the best of the Katana and combines them together to make one of the best weapon types I've ever seen. Now, perhaps one of the most important things about this weapon is that it's very easy to obtain and you can get it for yourself within probably 15 minutes of starting the DLC. But not only that, it is actually powerful enough to carry you through most of the DLC as well. So to go about getting it, all you have to do is travel to Dragon's Pit, which is very close to the start of the DLC. You can honestly run straight here with no issues at all, and once you get here, getting the weapon is as easy as killing the boss. I'm not going to show you the boss, but he is fairly easy, so if you made it past Mog, you'll be able to kill him with no problems. As for the weapon itself, it requires 15 strength and 20 dexterity to wield, but it scales equally between the two, so we will want to invest in the two equally to take full advantage of the scaling potential. We do of course have to talk about the Ash of War, Dragon Wound Slash, which is one of the best Ash of Wars I have seen. It does an absolute ton of damage, it's got good range, it looks amazing, and it even does additional damage to dragons, so very powerful indeed. Now because I like to make my builds as powerful as possible, I will also be including the Incantations Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength in the build as well, to really maximize both our damage and survivability. As for the Sacred Seal, you can use any one that you can equip because scaling does not affect buffs in any way, but personally I like to use the Dragon Communion Seal because it has a weight of 0. For the Wondrous Physick, I'm going to recommend the Opaline Bubble tier because it's great for soaking up damage just in case you get hit by a strong attack during the Ash of War animation, because while it's not slow, it's not fast either, and it does leave you open for longer than I'd like. The other tier I like to use is the Stone Barbed Cracked tier, and it's great for a lot of builds simply because it makes getting poise breaks easier, and poise breaks are absolutely huge for damage, so this one's really a no-brainer. Moving on to the armor, I like to use Relina's armor set because it has 51 poise and good damage reduction while still having a fairly low weight. So we won't have to worry about fat rolling or having to invest a lot into endurance. Plus, getting this armor is also pretty easy because it only requires that you of course kill Relina, which is a boss you will fight very early on in the DLC. However, if you want to get this armor right away, you can find Relina in Castle Ensis. Getting into the Talismans, we have the Shard of Alexander to boost Dragon Wound Slash damage, which we will be using a lot with this build. I also have Godfrey's Icon here, and I always love whenever I get the chance to use this talisman because it's just as powerful as the Shard of Alexander, but there are very few builds where you can use them both together. However, Dragon Wound Slash is actually chargeable, so we can stack both of them together for some pretty absurd damage. Next up we have a new talisman, which is the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. It makes all of your attacks with two-handed weapons do more damage, and more damage is always better. It is also very easy to get. You can just grab it out of a chest in the Temple Town Ruins. It will be in the highest structure. Now for the last talisman slot, it's really going to depend on how you like to play the game. If you like to go all in on damage, I'm going to recommend you the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, because the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana does have 55 blood loss buildup, which isn't a lot, but it is enough to get 1 or maybe 2 bleed procs during a boss fight. If you don't care about that, then I'm going to recommend you the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman instead, because it does give you a massive amount of survivability, and a lot of the enemies in this DLC really do hit like an absolute truck. Moving on to the stats I'm going to recommend, we have 55 Vigor, 21 Mind, 20 Endurance, 44 Strength, 44 Dexterity, and 25 Faith. I think 55 Vigor is about the sweet spot you should have for Shadow of the Erdtree because everything hits like an absolute truck. You might be tempted to go for a bit higher than this, but Vigor really does have diminishing returns, so if you're considering that, I would just recommend you use a defensive talisman instead. We have 21 Mind here because all you really need FP for is spamming Dragon Wound Slash, and it's really not that expensive, so with 21 Mind you will have enough FP to use the charged version of it quite a few times before you run out of FP. I think that's just perfect for making it very spammable without wasting too many points on FP. Now for the endurance, I have 20, which a lot of you may consider to be very low, but I really only give myself about enough to not fat roll, and that's about it. If you want to increase this a bit more for comfort, then you can definitely do that. Just take a couple points out of strength and dexterity, and you'll be good to go. But this is not a stamina hungry build, and unless you're constantly panic rolling, you shouldn't run into any stamina issues. Strength and dexterity are really our main stats and what we want to crank the highest because that's what's going to scale our damage with the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana. I have 44 in each, but you just want to get these as high as possible without compromising too much on the other important stats. The reason I have them split evenly is because the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana scales evenly with both, so to avoid diminishing returns we are utilizing both stats to get the most bang for our buck. And then of course we have the classic 25 Faith, which is just enough so we can cast both Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for the massive offensive and defensive buffs that they provide. I include this with all of my builds because it's just that good. Some people are probably wondering about Great Runes, and the two that I think are really worth considering are Godric's Great Rune because we use 6 of 8 stats, and if you use that you could save yourself a ton of levels. But my favorite Great Rune and personal choice is actually Morgoth's Great Rune because it just gives you 25% more health, and who doesn't like 25% more health? Especially with the damage some of these bosses are doing, it's quite nice to have. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and then check out this video next.